Before I get into the meat of the presentation, I did want to elaborate a little bit on what was said about supporting HOBY since 1985. Since 1985, I've been a member of this HOBY family. I was a HOBY myself, 1985 at Arizona State University as a sophomore at Tempe High School. So I know exactly what you're going through right now. I know the excitement that you're feeling to be amongst your peers, and I know all the great things you're going to do once you go out into society and lead it, which is what we're going to talk about today when we talk about societal leadership. But I would be remiss, too, if I didn't take a moment to honor my mentor, Hugh O'Brien. It was Hugh's example to me that motivated me to not only get involved with HOBY as a sophomore, but to stay involved over the course of the years. And it was later in time, working with my good friend back there, Ron Gillette, which I had the good fortune of getting involved with the HOBY Board of Trustees on a national level, and now currently serving as a member of the Advisory Council for HOBY Arizona. So this is a family you never leave, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about societal leadership today. And I do want this to be a dialogue. We have a finite amount of time together, but I want to pick your brain. I want to have a conversation with you about what societal leadership really means. So a lot of times when we're talking about leadership, and I've had the good fortune of teaching leadership courses for Arizona State University, for University of Phoenix, and for Northern Arizona University, and oftentimes we look at leadership just through an academic lens. And oftentimes we miss where the rubber actually meets the road, and what leadership is truly all about, and that's about taking action. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But when we talk about leadership, I gave a workshop in Los Angeles not too long ago to an audience of student government leaders from across the country in colleges and universities across America. And the first question I asked them with regards to leadership was, what does community mean to you? And they kind of looked around at each other. I said, well, think about the different communities that you're a part of in your daily life. It could be your school community, your faith community, your family, organizations that you're affiliated with. But just take a moment before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's discussion. Just think about the different communities that you're a part of right now. And society being the large community, if you will. Our world, our global society, our state, our nation, our city, our town. So think about that as we have this dialogue. It was a great Hebrew leader, Hillel, who once said, never separate yourself from the community. Never separate yourself from the community. That community of which I speak is our lifeblood. It's where we derive our strength. It's where we derive our unity amongst our diversity. We look at our country right now and it seems like we're more divided than ever before. But the thing is, we have to recognize not only the diversity, which is a source of strength to be sure, but look at those ties that bind us together. We're going to talk more about that when we talk about citizenship and voting and the different responsibilities, the rights and the responsibilities that we share in society. So, if we could go ahead and turn on the projector so we can get the first slide up there, please. So when we talk about societal leadership, there's a few items that you've had a chance to, hopefully, by this point in time. Okay, we can go ahead and talk in lieu of having the slide at the moment. But there's a few things that you've talked about under the terms of recall, reflect, and remember. When you've looked at personal leadership, you've looked at group leadership, and now we're going to be talking about societal leadership and making a positive change in our community. In the first workshops that you've had, you've talked a little bit, and once this comes up, we'll pull it up. In the meantime, we'll talk a little bit about some of the terms. When you talk about group members, individual group members of society, that's us as citizens. That's us as individuals trying to make a change. The that I'm talking about is relying on a common shared purpose and synergy. Group members. What am I talking about when I talk about synergy? How many of you have heard the saying that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts? That's how it is with society. That we are stronger together than we are individually. When I talked about deriving inspiration and strength and unity from one another, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Looking at that synergy. Bringing together disparate parts to try to create something that's bigger and better than ourselves individually. And we're called upon to do that on a daily basis. When we think about society, often we think, even in elections, when we vote for the people that represent us, we say, well, we voted for them, now it's up to them to take the baton and run with it. No. Our responsibility as individual group members just begins with voting. Our responsibility is also to follow through with the issues that affect us, to make sure that we're part of the change. How many of you have ever heard the saying from Mahatma Gandhi, be the change you wish to see in the world? How many of you believe that? Give me an amen. Amen. We have to be that change that we wish to see in the world. We can't just punt and expect other people to do everything for us. That's not what a strong and a true society is all about. Now, if you look at the next part, which is effective groups, capitalizing on the multiple talents and perspectives of each group member, and the power of diversity to generate creative solutions. I talked about the power of diversity. I've worked with companies and done workshops on leadership, and I've done diversity workshops. And when I talk about diversity, a lot of people's eyes start to roll. Here we go again. We're talking about diversity this and diversity that. But they don't see the benefits of diversity. They don't see the merits of diversity in all of its manifestations. I'm not just talking about cultural diversity. I'm talking about gender diversity. I'm talking about age diversity. I'm talking about diversity of opinion. It is those diversity differences that are the strengths that we need to rely on, that we need to tap into. Whether it's corporate America, whether it's our educational system, whether it's our society as a whole. Looking at how we capitalize on the multiple talents of those that are around us. There's a saying that no one person can do everything, but every person can do something. We all have something to contribute. All have strengths to bring to the table. And creating solutions to problems that abound. Many of you in this room are going to be change makers. All of you in this room are going to be change makers. Now you are going to be bringing new ideas to a society that's ever-changing. The amount of information that we have bombarding us on a daily basis. The problems that abound. It is easy for us to say, woe is us, the sky is falling. But we have the responsibility to say, we're not just going to curse the darkness, but we're going to light candles. Can I hear an amen? Amen. And then the last portion of what you've probably already talked about at length is the HOBY active leadership cycle. Group leadership concepts illustrate the importance of learning about and utilizing the diverse talents of others as your group prepares to take action. There is a great Japanese proverb that I love. I read it when I was about 18 years old. I just graduated from high school. And it said, vision without action is just a dream. I'll repeat that. Vision without action is just a dream. When I was a student at ASU, about 5 years later, preparing to enter graduate school, I saw that same quote. And I saw that I had only read half of it when I was younger. There was another part to it. Vision without action is just a dream, but action without vision is just a nightmare. Think about that. That's pretty deep. Vision without action is just a dream. If you have a great idea and you don't do something, the then what? The mobilization, the activization. if you don't take that next step of action, which is what HOBY is asking you to do, great ideas, they abound. But great ideas without motivation and action. Emerson once wrote that nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. That means saying, not only am I going to do it, I plan on doing it, but doing it. Now we're looking at these components as it pertains to societal leadership. Being responsible, being active, and being engaged. And we're going to talk about each of those in turn. Now, when you talk about being responsible, what does that mean to you? When you talk about being responsible, responsible for what? What are we responsible for in our society? Let me get some hands up. Let me get some participation here. What are we responsible for? Our actions. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Everything we do.
Everything we do, sir?
I guess ourselves.
So ourselves, okay.
The environment.
The environment.
Things that we affect.
Things that we affect.
Change.
Change. A couple more.
Next generation.
Huh?
Future.
Our future. Throw in the back.
Our next generation.
Our next generation. Excellent. We are responsible for this. We are our brothers and our sisters' keepers, aren't we? If we are going to be that change we wish to see in the world, we have to take responsibility. John Adams once said that I begin with the premise that the true function of leadership is to create more leaders, not more followers. Now, we're all going to be called upon to be followers at some point. And we're going to be called upon to be leaders at some point. But we have to be prepared to take both of those mantles equally and equally seriously. Right? As leaders in our families, as leaders in our schools, you have responsibility. How many of you are involved in leadership in your schools? Most of you, if not all of you, right? So you have responsibility for your student body. You're trying to make positive change on your campus. So what we're talking about is taking that and extrapolating it to the next level. This isn't going to be the end for you. This is just the beginning. You're going to go forth and you're going to be dealing with issues of college. What are you going to major in? When you start your family? When you get your first job? It's going to be a series of issues that take on responsibility. And so when we look at that responsibility, we have to ask ourselves, are we preparing ourselves for that responsibility? Are we providing ourselves with the knowledge and the tools to be effective in taking that responsibility? Being active. Being active. Being robust. The ancient Greeks' definition of happiness was full use of your powers along lines of excellence. Full use of your powers along lines of excellence. Not partial use of your powers. Not full use of your powers along lines of mediocrity. Along lines of excellence. And that calls upon us to ask of ourselves our level best in the classroom right now. Pushing yourself to be the best student you can be. In your campus activities, pushing yourself to be the best leader you can be. To be the best follower you can be when you're called upon to do that. But understanding that it's that comfort zone that we have to push ourselves out of to be fully active. We can't say it's someone else's responsibility. We're going to have to take that responsibility and come upon ourselves. Being engaged. Now, being engaged, what does engagement mean? What's the difference between being active and being engaged? Yes, sir? You're interested in wanting to do it. Yes. Who else? Someone that hasn't spoken yet. Yeah.
So you're participating, whereas in engagement you're really focused on something?
Participating, yeah. And the second part of that was you're focused on it?
You're focused on something, but you're not participating.
Okay. Now, is that true? If you're focused on it, you're not participating in it, Jill? It depends, right? Yes. Sir? Same thing? Sir? The back?
We are immersed in it, not only physically, but emotionally, and
Okay. Yeah, you know when I think about engagement, I was told a story by one of my mentors, a gentleman named Ortiz, who was the president for many years of a Hispanic organization, Washington, D.C., an advocacy organization called National Council of La Raza. And he's one of my great mentors. And he was telling me once the difference between contribution and commitment as it pertains to organizations, and the different roles that people play in organizations, those that contribute and those that are truly committed. And that reminds me of this. And the difference between contribution and commitment, he told me this story. He goes, Andy, in order to kind of create this image for you of the difference between contribution and commitment, think about a simple plate of bacon and eggs. And I'm thinking, where's this guy going with this? He goes, yes, a simple plate of bacon and eggs. Think about that. He said the chicken made a contribution, but the pig made a commitment. Think about it. Let it ruminate, let it percolate. But that's the way we look at society and life, right? There's those that are truly committed, and sometimes we're the same, where we're participating, like you said. Sometimes we're participating, and sometimes we're truly engaged and committed over the long haul. So these are things that we have to ask ourselves. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of you have heard the term social responsibility or civic engagement? Now, when you hear the term social responsibility, who wants to give me their definition of what social responsibility is? What is social responsibility? Yes, sir.
Taking credit for what you've done, socially, even if you made a mistake or not, have to be responsible.
Okay, taking credit for what you've done socially, even if you made a mistake or not. Okay, good, ma'am.
It's like actions that you're obligated to do to society.
Okay, actions that you're taking to keep society going. Yeah.
Because you've entered society, part of that social contract is benefiting the general good.
Okay, excellent. I had a hand over there.
Fulfilling and participating in your role.
Excellent.
I was going to say, being aware that you have an impact on people's lives around you.
Okay.
You should do your best to influence it properly.
Fantastic. Well, let me ask you the second part of the question. Civic engagement. What does civic engagement entail? Yes, ma'am. In the back. Yes.
So civic engagement is not only entail the foundation of civics, which is of course civic, but also being educated and informed about all things each other thing, and just like trying to be open with your power to inform things.
Very good. Very good. I like the part about being informed, right? Because when we talk about voting in particular, it's important to vote, right? In our country, I'll tell you this quick story about voting because I think it's important when we talk about civic engagement. I worked for a few years in my early career for an organization called Kids Voting Arizona. And it was a model voting education, civic education program that had its genesis here in Arizona. There's an organization called Kids Voting USA, also based in